So I don't think anyone had this on their bingo card today. Square Enix just announced a new Zelda-like in HD-2D art style. I'm really excited for this one. It's called The Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales. And right after the direct, they released a demo, which took about an hour to beat. I just played through the whole thing and I have a lot to say. I think this game is going to be really great. And if you're a Zelda fan like me, you're really going to want to check this one out. So let's get into it. Howdy everyone. My name is Evan. Going to be going a little bit off the cuff here, so forgive me if I'm a little scattered. But for a game I had just learned about like a couple hours ago, I'm really excited. This is going to be one of the most anticipated games of 2026 for me. And if you like 2D Zelda, if you like this core gameplay loop, you're really going to want to check this one out. So The Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales, kind of starts off with this world of Villa, which is definitely not derivative of another city. But this world is overrun by beasts and beast tribes, and there's one little pocket of humanity left. And it's this kingdom of Huther, it's called, and it's run by a king and a princess. And there's this young adventurer named Elliot, and he's pretty much called to the throne room to be like, hey, Elliot, so there's these ruins in this beast land. We need you to go find them and tell us what the hell is over there. So he's like, okay, sure. And he's got this little fairy. Her name is Faye. She's very important. We'll get back to her. But we don't really know anything else in this demo. And that's pretty much the extent of the story. Interesting setup. There's a cool little payoff at the end. I won't say what it is, but it's a cool little ending. Not something crazy or anything, but I'm sure there's more in store for this game, much more in store than what we have found out in this demo. Square even says it in the demo. It's mostly about the exploration and the combat, and so that's mostly what I want to talk about here. So the combat really at its core feels like 2D Zelda. You have a sword, which is like kind of a choppy swing, so it feels like Link in that way. You don't have to use a sword. In this demo, they give you two choices to fill in the other slot, so you can use a bomb or you can use a bow. You can charge up the sword to do like a little projectile attack, and the bows, they feel like bows in 2D top-down games. It feels like a bow. Sometimes it could be a little bit hard to aim. You can aim in like 8 directions, so sometimes it's not exactly the best, but you can also charge those up too and do like a multi-arrow shot, which is really cool. The bombs feel almost identical to Zelda though. Maybe the most interesting part of the core combat is so you have this shield which has a little health bar and you can like block things and it'll go down a little bit, you know, usual stuff, but you can parry attacks, and every enemy usually has like a telegraphed charge or strike, and if you parry it at just the right time, you can daze them and you won't lose any health in your shield meter. Definitely a very in mechanic in video games these days. That's mostly the basics of combat, but where things get really interesting is your fairy friend who I mentioned before, Faye. So you control her completely using the right stick. Kind of gives me that Cereza in the Lost Demon vibe where you're using one stick for each character on screen. But you can do a whole bunch of different stuff with Faye, and I think this is where the combat really has an extra element of depth that made it a lot of fun for me. You can basically ram Faye into enemies, and she does a little bit of attack, but it's more than that. You can also give her commands to stay behind Elliot, stay in front of Elliot, kind of keep close to him, or hide entirely, but there's not really any reason to use that in this demo. But where she really comes in handy is you can equip a special move to her, which will make Elliot in this demo, he can sprint or he can warp to wherever her position is, and I had a ton of fun with that. Warping around enemies, hitting them once and warping right behind their back was so much fun. I know you can parry and it kind of takes the parrying aspect out of that, but I feel like as you raise the difficulty up, you will definitely need that mechanic more. But it was very fun and very fluid, I will say, to teleport around enemies, to kind of get that back strike, to dodge attacks in that way. These things do run on a like cooldown timer, but actually that timer is independent for each move. So if you use your 2 warps and that needs to recharge, you can use the other ability, which is to sprint around. And you can really sprint around, but I actually ended up just crashing into a bunch of stuff all the time. And a lot of these movement options too are bigger than just kind of doing them in combat. There was one cave that I was in where you couldn't just jump and platform your way through it. You needed to actually use Faye to warp between each of these platforms, which I thought was really cool. And there's definitely going to be a lot of different ways that that's implemented throughout the game. I assume that Faye is going to get a lot more moves just because the progression system are definitely more towards a Zelda-like than, say, your typical RPG. From what I can tell, there is no level system here, so progression is mostly just upgrade and gear-based. You can find what are essentially heart containers around the world. All of these new techniques for Faye to learn, I'm sure they will give you different options to traverse and find things that you couldn't previously reached before. And there's tons of stuff to buy. Like one of the main things the game tells you immediately was to buy more empty vials, kind of like the empty jars in Zelda, so you can carry more healing potions. I keep using the Zelda comparison, but money is a lot like rupees. It drops from enemies and it drops from jars and barrels that you break around the map. There are some RPG elements, but they're kind of limited. Like there's an accessory slot, but there's only one of them. There's one defined sword slot, and I think it might just work up in tiers. I don't know exactly how it's going to be, if there's going to be different swords that you can equip, because each of them have a different star rating. So maybe there's different swords, like different 2-star swords, different 3-star swords. But where the real customization lies is more in like your build and your combat loadout. You'll get these gems called magicite gems, which basically act as like perks or modifiers to how the combat works. So for example, one of my favorite magicite gems, I was actually like the first one I found, and it allowed me to kind of ricochet my arrows off of enemies into other ones. I actually ended up running out of arrows because I was really enjoying this combat loop of hitting someone, teleporting behind them, and then hitting them with an arrow, and then that ricocheting off into my next target, and then teleporting behind them and striking them with my sword. There's definitely a lot of flexibility in this combat system, and you will be able to tailor it to how you want to play. The combination of magicite perks and phase abilities makes for a lot of really exciting possibilities and how you approach each battle. On the exploration side of things, I thought this world map was very nice to navigate. There were a lot of tropes from the genre in here. You can tell like there was walls with cracks in them and cliffs that you couldn't reach right now, or you needed to use your Fey abilities to do that. You know, that's typical run-of-the-mill stuff. This first area in the demo is pretty basic, but it was really addicting to go around. In the areas you can access in this early game, there's enough there to keep you wanting to look around. Pretty early on in the demo, I found a quiver that raised my maximum arrows up by like, I think it was 60, so it was double what my original one was. The other fun note about exploration is, so there are occasional like temples or shrines of life, I think they were called, I don't know exactly, but there were little challenges that you needed to overcome. One of them, you needed to use Faye's sprint ability to get through these falling platforms. When you got to the end, you got like a heart container, so it was a pretty good reward for doing it. These are definitely going to be fun things that you need to do or you need to look for as you go through the game. And just overall, the game has a very Square Enix feel to it. I know I've said the word Zelda probably a million times. If you've been taking a shot every time I said Zelda, you'd be dead by now. That Team Asano, Square Enix charm is definitely still in there. In terms of graphics, this isn't exactly what we wanted from this Direct for the Switch 2. However, it runs at 60 frames a second. The game looks really good. It sounds great. The soundtrack actually was phenomenal. I hung on the title screen for a while. That main theme was very, very nice. Team Asano usually does not mess around when it comes to soundtracks. Octopath Traveler 2 had one of my favorite soundtracks ever. And overall, I think if you are a Zelda fan, if you're a Square Enix fan, if you're a Secret of Mana fan, you should give this game a try. And really, you should give it a try if you own a Switch 2, because the demo is free and it really isn't going to take up that much of your time. So just give it a try, see if you like it. The thing I am least excited about this game is the name. I know we have gotten on Square Enix for these weird-ass names, Octopath Traveler, Various Day Life, Triangle Strategy, but this one, like, The Adventures of Elliot, it's almost like too plain, but that is so besides the point. I'm sure 3 years down the line, no one's going to care, because back when the Switch came out, everyone was like, Octopath Traveler, and now we have 3 of them, and nobody cares. Nobody bats an eye at it at this point. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the game. Let me know, have you played it? Are you excited for The Adventures of Elliot? Let me know down below in the comments. Sorry if this video is a little bit scatterbrained, but I'm just trying to get a little bit better speaking off the cuff. I have some notes here, but not that many. So let me know. Till the next one, guys. Peace out. I'll see you later.